initially believed the barn was empty. That's what the officers noted upon their arrival at the rural Pine Hollow Ranch. It seemed like just another fallen building under the Arkansas sun. But then Zeus, Officer Paul Simmons' K9 partner, refused to move. He barked so loudly and for so long, the sound echoed like thunder across the dry fields. You don't ignore that kind of bark, especially from a dog like Zeus. At first, nobody took it seriously. The farm had been abandoned for months, possibly years. Grass pushed through the cracks in the barn floor, fence posts leaned like old men, and the only tracks in the dust were from raccoons or an occasional drunk trespasser. Yet, Zeus was incredibly focused that day. His tail was stiff, ears flattened, and his chest moved with each bark that hit the silence like a warning bell. Officer Simmons sensed something was wrong. He had worked with Zeus for 5 years, long, enough to know the difference between an alert and a true alarm. This wasn't about finding drugs, nor was it tracking a fugitive. This felt different. Zeus's barking had changed. That sound seemed to be saying, "Someone is in there." The call came in around 6:40 a.m. A hiker reported unusual noises near an old horse ranch outside county lines. Normally, this wouldn't warrant a police unit, but Simmons was already nearby doing drills with Zeus and decided they would check it out. The first 20 minutes were routine. The place looked deserted, with no signs of a break-in. The main house was boarded up, the paddocks overgrown, and the barn door was almost collapsed from wind and weather. But then Zeus pulled hard, lunging towards the barn, nearly pulling Simmons off his feet. His tail was stiff, nose low, and he was growling softly like a low engine. Simmons called for backup. "Something's got him going," he mumbled into his radio. Inside the barn, dust particles floated in golden sunlight beams cutting through the roof. The first thing they noticed was the smell: damp hay, rust, and something else, something that didn't belong. Zeus's head snapped towards the far corner. He charged, barking fiercely now, scratching at the wooden floorboards. That's when Simmons saw it. Not a door, not a hatch, but a section of dirt and broken wood that didn't quite fit the rest, as if someone had poorly patched a hole. "Zeus," he said under his breath, "what on earth did you find?" Zeus was never wrong. The dog had tracked missing children through heavy rain, sniffed out illegal substances in gas tanks, and once found a man's body in a swamp when even specialized search dogs had given up. He didn't bark without a reason. So when he barked like his life depended on it, Simmons knew to trust him. The barn was about to reveal a secret. They grabbed shovels from the truck. The boards came up easily. Beneath them was packed dirt, and under that, a hollow sound. Simmons felt a chill. They dug faster, sweat and dust coating their arms. Zeus walked in tight circles, barking, whining, spinning like a spring wound too tightly. Then they hit it, a sheet of plywood, nailed down as a makeshift cover. Simmons pried it up and saw the eyes. 4 pairs, wide, sunken, terrified. Let me pause. For a moment here. If this kind of story captivates you, if it touches your heart, showing the kind of courage and loyalty that only animals seem to possess, then please do us a small favor. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Every click helps us share these stories of real-life heroism and ensures that dogs like Zeus are never forgotten. Now, back to the barn. The children were barely breathing, covered in dirt. Their wrists were raw from rope. One of them, no older than 7, was holding the others like a mother. No words came from their mouths, only whimpers and quiet gasps. Simmons froze for a second. He could no longer hear Zeus barking. The world had gone silent. Then, his training took over. He radioed dispatch, calling for paramedics, backup, child services, and even the National Guard if needed. He lifted the plywood higher and reached in. One of the children flinched. Simmons paused, lowered his voice. "It's okay. You're safe now. We've got you." Zeus whined beside him. The oldest girl looked at the dog. Her lips trembled. "He barked," she whispered. "We prayed someone would hear." Later, they would learn the children had been missing for almost 6 weeks, abducted from different counties, brought here, and hidden underground. No electricity, no food for days, no light except for the cracks between the boards. They were kept in an old horse stall beneath the barn floor, locked away as if meant to be forgotten. An unidentified man had been bringing them. Scraps until 2 weeks prior. Then nothing. No one came back. They would have died if Zeus hadn't heard something no one else did and refused to leave. That night, Simmons sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance as they drove the children to the hospital. Zeus rode in the back of the patrol car with another officer. The air was heavy with silence. No sirens, just the hum of tires on cracked pavement and the occasional sniffle from the little ones wrapped in blankets. Simmons couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Why did Zeus insist on that barn? He hadn't caught a scent on the ground. There were no obvious clues. But somehow the dog knew. They say dogs hear things we cannot, that they feel frequencies humans will never understand. Maybe Zeus picked up a whisper, a vibration, a desperate heartbeat echoing through the barn floor. Or maybe he just knew there were children in the dark who needed someone to believe they were still worth saving. The town of Pine Hollow had not seen this many reporters since the tornado of '92. By the next morning, the barn was roped off with yellow crime scene tape. Patrol cars lined the roadside. Drones buzzed overhead. The quiet stretch of farmland had become the focus of a national news story. K9 discovers missing children in abandoned horse barn. The story spread rapidly across social media, cable, news, podcasts, and even late-night talk shows. It wasn't every day a dog saved 4 kidnapped children by barking at a patch of dirt. Zeus didn't care about the cameras. He just wanted his toy back. At the station, Officer Paul Simmons sat in the locker room, staring at his boots. He hadn't truly slept since they had pulled those children out of that hole. Their faces kept appearing in his mind, pale, sunken, trembling. And that little girl, the one who whispered, "He barked. We prayed someone would hear." Paul rubbed his eyes. He had been a police officer for nearly 12 years, seen drug overdoses, fatal accidents, armed standoffs, and once even helped deliver a baby in the back of a minivan. But this was different. This wasn't just a crime. This was evil that had grown in silence. And if Zeus hadn't barked, Paul didn't want to complete that thought. Zeus, meanwhile, was eating a cheeseburger, a real one from Buddy's Diner, with extra bacon and no bun, exactly how he liked it. Paul had driven through the drive-thru on their way back to headquarters and told the person at the window, "Have you ever made a burger for a hero?" The person just stared, then gave him an extra milk bone for free. Zeus had earned it. By noon, reporters lined the sidewalk outside the precinct. They wanted statements, interviews, and sound bites. Was it true the children were almost dead? How did the dog know? Can we film with the K9? Paul briefly stepped outside to talk with them. He was polite, careful with his words. The investigation was ongoing. The responsible man had not yet been identified. But yes, Zeus had led them to the barn. Yes, the children were alive. And no, they were not ready to speak to the press. Privately, Paul worried not only about the man who had taken them, but also about the aftermath. The children didn't need cameras. They needed rest, quiet, and safety. And the dog, he just needed his ball. Over the next few days, the case became stranger. No fingerprints in the barn, no personal items left behind. The truck was found in the woods, belonging to a man with no prior criminal record. His body was identified through dental records. He had crashed a week earlier, likely trying to escape. The medical examiner listed the cause as internal bleeding. He had bled out slowly, alone, unseen. Paul kept wondering, why those children? Why that place? Detectives reviewed hours of missing person reports. 3 of the 4 children had been taken from different towns, all during custody disputes or social service transitions. The 4th, a little boy named Mason, had no clear official records at all. How the man had gathered them, how he moved them without anyone noticing, was still a puzzle. But the one thing everyone agreed on was this: without Zeus, they would still be down there. Zeus returned to light duty at the department. He was a working dog, but he wasn't just a tool. Paul made sure he got rest, walks, belly rubs from the front desk clerks, and plenty of treats from Officer Linda, who had started keeping peanut butter in her desk drawer just for him. But something was off. Zeus wasn't barking anymore, not from exhaustion, but from a heaviness. At night, he lay beside Paul's bed, ears twitching, eyes half open. Sometimes he let out a quiet whimper, as if he was still hearing voices no one else could. Paul began to wonder, was this guilt or memory, or just the burden of a job no one else could do? A week after the rescue, a town hall meeting was held. The mayor, the sheriff, social workers, and a few state representatives attended. The community wanted answers, and they wanted to honor their heroes. Zeus sat on stage next to Paul, wearing a small badge on his harness. The room was packed. Some cried, some clapped, some asked difficult questions. How did this happen? How were those children missed? Why didn't someone know? Paul stood and said one thing. I don't have all the answers, but I know this. Our dogs don't lie. They don't get sidetracked. They don't miss signs. They don't ignore pain. Maybe we should start learning from them. The room fell silent, and then it erupted in applause. Later that night, as Paul and Zeus drove home, the patrol car smelled faintly of French fries and dog hair. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the soy fields. Zeus sat in the back seat, tongue out, tired but peaceful. Paul looked at him through the rearview mirror. You know you saved their lives, right? Zeus blinked slowly, then once more. He gave a low, happy bark. The next morning, Paul was drinking coffee when his phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. One of the children, Mason, the quietest one, was asking to see Zeus. Paul didn't hesitate. He and Zeus drove over that afternoon. Mason was in a pediatric recovery room, surrounded by stuffed animals and IV tubes. But when Zeus walked in, tail wagging gently, Mason sat up straighter than he had in days. He didn't say a word. He just reached out, arms trembling, and buried his face in Zeus's neck. And that's when the boy finally cried, not from fear, but from relief. Zeus became a regular visitor at the hospital after that. He wasn't trained as a therapy dog, but no one cared. Children who hadn't spoken in weeks started smiling. Nurses made room in the schedule just for his visits. It was as if his very presence reminded them, you were found. You are not alone. The barn, meanwhile, had been torn down, not for legal reasons, but because the town decided no child should ever see it again. In its place, the community began building a small memorial garden, a bench, a plaque, some sunflowers, and a statue of a German shepherd with one paw raised. The inscription read, "For those who bark when others stay silent." That night, Paul sat on his porch, holding a beer, with Zeus lying at his feet. The stars above Pine Hollow were clear and endless. "Think we did good, buddy?" Zeus didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The media had moved on. That was just how it went. One week it was Miracle in the Barn with headlines like K9 Zeus uncovers secret prison beneath abandoned ranch. The next week they were talking about a celebrity breakup and some political scandal on the coast. But for the people in Pine Hollow, the sheriff, the nurses, the neighbors, and especially Officer Paul Simmons, the miracle wasn't over. It was still unfolding quietly, day by day, in the hospital and in the heart of a boy named Mason. Mason didn't speak much, not at first. The doctor said it was normal. Trauma does that to children. It steals their voices, buries them under fear. But Paul noticed something strange. Mason didn't seem afraid of Zeus. In fact, he seemed drawn to him. Whenever the other officers stopped by the hospital, Mason would tense up. He would look away, shrink down in his bed, like a whisper afraid to be heard. But when Zeus entered the room, Mason changed. He sat up straighter, his eyes widened. Sometimes, he even smiled just a little. It started with small gestures. The first time Mason reached out to pet Zeus, his hand trembled so hard it looked like a leaf in the wind. But Zeus stayed perfectly still, head resting on the mattress, eyes gentle, as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere, kid." The second time, Mason took one of Zeus's ears and rubbed it between his fingers. That night, the nurse said Mason slept without nightmares. On the third visit, Paul pulled out a tennis ball. "I bet you can throw it farther than I can," he joked. Mason didn't laugh, but he did throw the ball, and for the first time, Zeus didn't chase it. He walked over to Mason, nudged the ball back toward him, and waited. Paul watched the two of them play in silence, no commands, no tricks, just trust. The case, meanwhile, wasn't progressing as fast as everyone had hoped. The man found in the crashed truck, believed to be the abductor, had no criminal record, no known aliases, and no confirmed link to the children. Investigators were going through burner phone data, credit card transactions, and blurry trail camera footage from the woods where his truck was found. Everything pointed to one horrifying conclusion: this man had acted alone, and worse, he had planned it. The barn had been equipped with reinforced floors, a hidden door under the hay, and chains secured with custom locks. Whoever this person was, he didn't just stumble into evil, he built it. Paul couldn't stop thinking about the timeline. How? Long had the children been down there? Why didn't anyone notice? What kind of man watches children starve? One night, Paul sat in the precinct long after hours. Zeus was at his feet, snoring softly. A stack of files sat untouched in front of him. Testimonies, medical reports, case notes. He didn't open them. He stared at the wall instead, at a framed photo of the department's first K9 from decades back. "Wish you could tell me what he smelled," Paul muttered. Zeus stirred, but didn't wake. Paul knew the truth. It wasn't a scent Zeus had followed. It was something deeper, a vibration, a silence too loud to ignore, perhaps a kind of energy only dogs could sense. Or maybe, in the absence of any other voice, the universe spoke through the only one still barking. The next week, Paul and Zeus were invited to the school district's spring assembly. It was awkward at first. Paul wasn't a public speaker. He stood behind the podium, cleared his throat, and tried to be serious. But the microphone squealed, and a second grader sneezed so hard it echoed like a shotgun. Zeus broke the tension. He walked across the stage, sat in front of the microphone, and barked once. The children loved it, cheering, laughing, clapping. And in that room full of teachers and tiny humans, Paul said something simple. Sometimes heroes don't wear badges. Sometimes they don't say anything at all. They just show up and refuse to leave. Mason's progress happened slowly. One evening, Paul received a call from the hospital. Mason had spoken. Not a full sentence, just one word. Zeus. That was it, but it was everything. The nurse on duty said he had been holding Zeus's photo when he said it, whispered it like a secret, then smiled. Paul hung up the phone and stared at the photo of his own daughter, now grown and away.